Okay, welcome to the fourth common session of Sunoikisis's Digital Classics Summer Semester 2018. Today we have a session about linguistic annotation, and our two guests are Eleni Bozia and Anise Ferreira. So Eleni is from the University of Florida and Anise from UNESP, Brazil. And you have, as usual, the class outline on GitHub. And we have a long description, many readings, a bibliography, other resources, and exercises, and the essay title. So the plan today, we have two presentations. So Eleni is going to start, and she will talk about tree-bank, metric system, and stylometric analysis on Aretusa. And then we have Anise with Greek particles and tree-bank annotation. So both Eleni and Anise have been contributing a lot to Sunoikisis's Digital Classics. So this is not their first session, but we are very, very happy to have them here again. So thank you, Eleni, thank you, Anise, and welcome back. So I think we can start with Eleni.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. So our intention today in this session is to explore the potential, the challenges, and also the practical usage of annotation. The creation of several tools, and personally I'm using Aretusa. Anise has been working with Tandra, has made such analysis possible. However, first, for heavily inflected languages with rich nuancing, since they rely a lot on parts of speech, like particles, it's very difficult to comprehend them, and it's very difficult to annotate them. So Anise is going to explore that aspect of annotation. Second, another issue that we would like to explore in our session is, or to discuss, bring forward, is how to utilize annotation further and use it as a research tool. And today I'm going to talk about a personal case study, which started as a personal individual project, but now with the help of my students, I am trying to open it up, and I'm going to show you today how you can also contribute if you are interested. So let me start, let me share my screen.
Okay, we can see it. Perfect.
Thank you. So the personal case study, it's the period that I'm interested in, and I have been working for several years, is that of the High Empire, 1st to 3rd century CE, even though I have expanded it slightly, going backwards to the 1st century BCE. The reason why I'm interested in that particular time period is that we have the landscape of the Roman Empire is polyvalent. We have native Romans who are, though fluent both in Latin and Greek. We have Greeks who are Roman citizens, and they can also be fluent in Latin. We have other Easterners who are potentially trilingual, or even Westerners who are potentially trilingual and have also assumed Roman citizenship. So we are talking about a time period when identity, both individual and civic, are constantly reshaped, but also a time period during which language is a premier denominator of someone's identity, but how can you pinpoint and describe identity when someone is trilingual? So how do they feel? Do they feel like they are Syrians, or do they feel Romans, or do they feel Greek? So this very realization burdens language with an omnipresent power, as it is a premier way of expressing oneself, but also it's a way of communicating oneself to the society. But it can also be acquired. Hence, I decided to focus my analysis, and I have been focusing my analysis on a study of the Attic dialect as it was shaped in the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, and then as it was revived during the time of the High Empire. And I decided, when I started the project, I decided to start with structural and syntactical quantification of language, trying to determine whether we have, whether Attic dialect was revived as it was, Attic oratory particularly, or whether it was revived, but then reshaped according to imperial standards. Now, what made this even more interesting was references that I found in 2nd century lexicographers, where they are talking about, you see, I have some references here, deuteroi Attikoi, so they're talking about second Atticism. They are talking about first Atticis, and the second quote reference is middle Atticis. And then Phrynichus, the Atticist, the third quote that I have, is referencing nothos Attikizondes, hoinothos Attikizondes, so basically fake Atticizers. So the research question that I wanted to explore is this: who were the first Atticizers? Who were the second Atticizers? Who would be the middle Atticizers? And does this refer only to classical Attic and its differentiation from imperial Attic? Or we are also talking about bilinguals, so non-native Attic speakers? So my intention is, like I said, to parameterize in a way Atticism, and I decided to use as data sets 3 classical Attic orators, Lysias, Isocrates, and Demosthenes, and then compare and contrast them both syntactically, and lately I have started with the linguistic part as well, to compare them also linguistically and grammatically with 3 imperial Attic orators, namely Lucian, Dio Chrysostom, and Aelius Aristides. The reason for these choices is that Dionysius of Halicarnassus wrote his treatises on the Attic orators, on the classical Attic orators, and he has several insights regarding both their syntactical and linguistic characteristics. And I decided to use him as the backdrop against which I was going to run my comparisons. So I used the Arethusa framework. I annotated manually about 300 sentences, but I have also used other people who were kind enough to share their results, who annotated particularly Lysias and Thucydides, whom I used as a tester since he's not technically an orator. And more specifically, I worked with selections from Lysias' Olympic oration, Isocrates' Against the Sophists, Demosthenes' First Philippic, then Lucian's Zeuxis, Dio's Oration 42nd, an address to his native city, and Aelius Aristides' Encomium to Rome. The reason why I selected these was so that I can stick to epidictic oratory, trying to minimize discrepancies that would be apparent because of differences in the style of the speech itself. So first, I developed a unified node-based metric for implementing various syntactical construction metrics, indicative, at least according to my philological analysis, indicative of the syntactical attributes of the sentences. And then I proceeded to granulate the style of those 6 orators and compare the stylistic particularities. Now, in the second phase, I decided to start working more closely with grammar and vocabulary as well. So I started working with stylometric analysis, and particularly with stylo, and ran comparisons with the words, characters, and specific n-grams, 2 and 3 characters together, trying to granulate grammar, or at least hoping to do that. Now, Atticism as both a literary and a rhetorical style, and I'm mentioning literary and rhetorical since I want to focus, like I said, on syntax and grammar as well, has been the focus of considerations and debates since basically the 1st century BC up to our own era. The appearance of the so-called Asianism also has prompted further discussions, always in favor of Atticism. What's disappointing, though, is that we don't have any Asiatic oratory samples that I can compare. Now, another significant term in Attis's history is its modulation into a writing style, but beyond language. Since we have Roman orators and theoreticians, and particularly Cicero and Quintilian, who espouse Atticism, they theorize upon its construction and characteristics, and they wish to teach it for the benefit of Roman oratory. So this is why I thought that Atticism must be a phenomenon, a style in itself that moves beyond language. Now, what makes this conversation and what prompted me to get into this line of research is that Dionysius credits the Attic revival, credits the Romans for this Attic revival. And in this quote that I have here, he basically gives us a comprehensive history of classical oratory. And he closes his introduction by saying that I think that the cause and origin of this great revolution has been the conquest of the world by Rome, who has thus made every city focus its entire attention upon her. And this is how he begins his analysis of Atticism. Now he goes through, he has a treatise on Lysias, one on Isocrates, one on Demosthenes, on Isaias. He has a very extensive work on Thucydides. And I went through, I only have here obviously only samples, but I have been through the entire treatises, all of them, and I have found all the references to syntactical and grammatical and verbal style, which I have accumulated. And particularly for Lysias, he says that he's completely pure in his vocabulary. So we do have references to linguistics, and he's the perfect model of the Attic dialect. However, on another quote, he references Lysias' style. So he's using standard, not figurative expressions, clarity, brevity, which is a characteristic that I'm going to call upon later, concision, terseness, vivid representation. Later on, in his discussion of Isocrates, he discusses Isocrates and comparatively studies his style with that of Lysias, but we get a different kind of insight, since he has, and I have bolded it here, like its predecessor, it avoids the banality of archaic and obscure words, so you have language here, but uses figurative language somewhat more than Lysias. So there we have an analysis of syntactical characteristic of Isocrates, and something that would also it gave me an idea as to what kind of metrics I should set in order to study the styles of Lysias and Isocrates. And then continue with Demosthenes. Something that we are all familiar and we have all been there when we first started with Demosthenes. Dionysius says, in the first place, before rounding off the first idea, a second one is introduced and a third is subjoined before the second is complete, and material belonging to the second is tacked on after the third has been completed. So first of all, it is fascinating that someone so many centuries before us has had the same reaction to Demosthenes as we did. And then this, I felt immediately when I read it that this is something that we can actually see when we are tree banking and we are trying to reconstruct the sentence in the form of a tree, and we have a subordinate clause, and we are trying to figure out where it should be or to which sentence it should be joined. Then continue with the imperial orators, we have Lucian, and he references his usage of the language and how he has been trying very hard, because he's not a native speaker, and he has an entire work apologizing about a mistake that he made when he was greeting someone, when he says, be healthy instead of joy to you, and it was the wrong time of the day. So we have a reference not only to the linguistic vocabulary revival of Attic, but also the fact that someone is doing something incorrectly because he's not a native speaker. So now we are talking about bilinguals and trilinguals. And in another work, Lucian, again, he says that he was being praised by his audience, but he was very disappointed when he found out that he was being praised for his unconventional style that does not conform to the ancient canon, even though he's trying to use good vocabulary, conformity to the ancient canon, and Attic grace. So we have people who are consciously trying to reuse Attic to a certain degree. So I started, like I said, manually annotating the sentences, and I obviously have one of it. This slide here with the I hope that the screen sharing is working time-wise. So the slide that you have in front of you is particularly interesting, since Dionysius not only does he comment on the style of each of the orators, but he also rewrites some of their sentences, always going for the simpler style, which is the one that you have on your right, where you can see he has substituted an entire secondary clause with just a participle. And this is only one example. He has done this extensively throughout his treatise. And again, these are all elements that we can look for if we explore the XML of the tree-banked sentences. So again, I have a sample of each. And what I did was to change a little bit the original XML structure of the Arethusa framework. And the Arethusa one is the one that I have on top. Mine is the one that I have on the bottom. I made it a little simpler in the sense that the word basically the word that comes before is the parent, and then you have the child, and then the child of the child. So it's my queries run faster. This is the only change that I did. And then I annotated every sentence. I consider every sentence to be a tree on its own, and to have properties. What is that this word is the child of this, or how many children does this word have? And also what you can see here is utter. I'm working with the obviously with the syntax of the word, if something is attributive, if something is a conjunction, etc. So what I do with this, if we consider this to be an example of an annotated sentence, I have set metrics and weights for each one of the nodes. If we are, and this basically the result that I have here is the simplest form of the formula. If you want the computer to calculate the number of words in each sentence, so basically every node is a word, so it will have a weight of 1, and the value. I changed, sorry. The slide changed. And since every word is a word and should be counted, has a value of 1. So 1 by 1 plus 1 by 1, and you can see that automatically this tree has 7 words. Now, how can you explore that? If we want to count the number of attributives in a sentence, again, I retained the weight for all the nodes is 1, but the metric value is 1 only when on my tree, the node is marked as ATR, as attributive. And then you can see that automatically the formula gives me number 2 as the example tree that I have here. The attributives are only 2. Now, if you want to see, for example, how flourishing and flowery one orator is, and you want to see how many attributives he is using with the percentage, with respect to the percentage, with respect to the number of the words in the sentence. So basically, you want to see the percentage of attributives. The formula is exactly the same, but it also divides it by the number of words in each sentence. So in this case, by 7. I can do the same, and I have done the same for the number of leaves to examine how deep a sentence goes. The percentage of leaves with respect to the number of words in the sentence, the height of the tree, and then you can see the difference between the original sentences and the ones that Dionysius rewrote, since you're going to have a longer, a higher tree when you have a secondary clause, compared to a tree where instead of a secondary clause, you basically have just one participle. Again, the height of the tree as percentage of the words. If you want to see if you have several, let's say, secondary clauses in a very small sentence, to put it simply. The size of the largest family, which could give you, again, secondary clauses, or it could give you participial phrases. Size of the largest family, again, as percentage of words, and you can see if you have a very long secondary clause, and what kind of secondary clause it is. If it is a relative clause, that would point to an attributive again, and different other metrics that I set, again, with this mentality in mind, with Dionysius in mind. And now I have some slides for your convenience, but what I wanted to show you, the program that I developed, it's very simple, but I asked the help of one of my students to make it available online in case you want to use it. I have here the API. The site is www.metrics.org. And we have information Regarding the entire program, how it is designed, you can explore the source code, how I set the metrics, the weights, and something else that I wanted to show you. Yeah, the tree bank sentence. So basically the entire program, the API of the entire program. If you want to add, contribute, how you can get, for example, the number of nodes. Now to show you, I have a demo for today. Why is it not opening? It was working when I was testing it before. I have all the metrics here, and it's very easy, very intuitive if you would like to contribute. Why is it not working? I'm so sorry about that. One more and one more try, and then I'll continue. It's not working. I will make all this information available, and it will be very easy. Basically, what I was going to show you, I'll try one more time before I'm finished. I have all these. I have all these the JavaScript in the system, and as you can see, like I said, it's a very simple formula. For here, I set M is for the new metric. For this one, for example, percentage of attributives, you need a weight. So I'm creating a function, what the weight is going to be. So I want for this to return 1, since it's percentage, by the go to the node, go to the root, and get the number of words, basically. And then I need another function, which is the metric. I have another I set another function, which is the metric. So how do you know which are the verbal attributives? Go to the node, if n, basically, get the relation. If it is equal to ATR, it's attributive, but I do not want to get adjectival attributives, since I'm looking for percentage of verb attributives. So the other condition is and, go to the post tag, get the node, get the post tag, and since we have other information on the post tag, on this position, if it is marked as a V, so it is a verb, then return 1, else return 0. So basically, in the site that I showed you, the metrics.org, this is available. So if you have other ideas about other possible metrics that would help describe syntax better, it's as easy as this. You basically copy and paste this, and you just change a little bit the parameters. Let me try one more time. I'm sorry about that. These are the metrics that I used, and I plan to continue adding. I just haven't had enough time yet, but I showed some of these before in my example tree: the height of the tree, the width of the tree, the number of leaves, number of attributives, the size of the largest family, the verbal attributives, the percentage of the coordinates, and maybe Anise can help me with the. the number of nodes under ATR as percentage of the nodes, and the adjectival attributives. And then, obviously, I got for all the sentences one number for each one of the metrics. This is only a minimal screenshot of the data. And then I used MATLAB in order to get perform principal component analysis in order to actually compare those numbers. And I tried they look like different visualizations, but I had a point in all these. There was a reason why I tried different principal component analysis. If you notice the principal axis and the secondary axis, they use different metrics. So the principal axis found that the biggest distribution is based on the width, the family width, and what is under attributive. And for the secondary axis, the under attributive, what is the under the attributes and the family width. And these are all the sentences and the eigenplanes of each one of the authors. And these are cleaned up. Each one of the markings here is basically the average of the sentence of each one of these authors. Now, I did this, I ran principal component analysis, and I changed slightly the perspective in the others. So I did it from the perspective of Lysias. So basically, if Lysias was comparing himself to all the other orators, and I know that it's you don't have enough time to process, but then if you go through the results, you will see it's obvious that there are similarities between classical Attic orators. There are similarities between imperial Attic orators. You do find Lucian, who purposely tried to recreate Atticism, but also stay as close to Attic as possible, being somewhere in the middle. And you can, again, if you take close look at the results and the metrics that were used, you can actually draw some very interesting conclusions. I did the same from the perspective of Isocrates, and you can see how the ellipses change direction in a way that show different tendencies. Demosthenes from the perspective of Demosthenes, from the perspective of Lucian, from the perspective of Dio, and Elius was, I think, the most interesting / confusing of all. I'm still working and processing the results, but this is basically as far as I have got with these metrics. And instead of continuing adding, I wanted to make it available so that other people perhaps can contribute and make it have more results, or if they don't want to try with oratory, they can try with different authors. But then the last part is, since Dionysius seems to be focusing not only on syntax, but on language as well, I wanted to employ a different tool so that I can compare grammar and language of the orators and see what sort of affinities or lack thereof I might observe, and if they would match my result. If they wouldn't, what were the difference? What would the differences be? So I started with stylometric analysis that was first used in 1439 to determine fallacies. And it was established the basics of stylometry in the late 19th century. I have shared these on the readings. I have the links, but the links are also active here through the PowerPoint, through the slides. Case studies using stylometric analysis. And one, for example, the second one, making hit music into science. They have tried stylometric analysis to find how they can write popular pop songs. And it has been used for, obviously, authorship, for legal cases, etc. There are several tools that perform stylometric analysis. For my work, I used Stylo. And these are the, let's say, the parameters according which Stylo performs the comparisons. So as you can see, more language related compared to mine that was focused on syntax. And these are some of the results that I got. The cluster analysis that groups the orators. If you can see, there is a discrepancy. Lucian, in the syntactical analysis, was always close to classical Attic orators. Here, when you compare his language and grammar, he is set a little further apart. And Lysias and Socrates are closely grouped, which makes sense if you consider that they are actually writing. They are a lot closer to each other than imperial orators. I can show you the words and the grams that were used for these comparisons. Interestingly, Demosthenes seems to be grouped with imperial orators rather than with classical Attic orators. Then I ran principal component analysis, again, using the same data set, but instead of the cluster analysis, what it does is it groups authors. PCA tries to find the biggest distribution, the largest distribution of authors. Again, it's interesting to see that Lysias and Socrates are still closely linked. And Demosthenes, however, still is on the side of imperial Attic orators rather than classical Attic orators. And I wanted to, in this one, I used 3 grams. So basically trying to compare grammar, the results were similar. And 3 grams again, so comparing grammar again with the same data set. And interestingly enough, Demosthenes is very close to Aelius Aristides, at least grammar-wise, based on the, I have to admit, limited test that I have run so far. I can show you really quickly. Stylo produces automatically the words, the grams, whatever it is that it compared. So you can actually go afterwards and try to make sense of the results and the numbers. You can see here is the 3 grams. The first that is blank, it means that this is the beginning of a word, so a word that starts with ka. This is the ending of a word, so that's why we have a blank spot here, because another word is starting afterwards. And I did the same for the word statistics. The numbers that you have here are the percentage of times that this particular word appears in each one of the authors. Interestingly enough, I noticed that de comes up a lot, which also came up in my syntactical analysis. That's why I had it as one of the metrics. But again, as you can see, I have a lot of things to go through. And before I pass the baton to Anise, I thought I should try one more time. Something is not working. Anyway, that was, I don't want to overstep my time. So that was all. Thank you. And I will make sure if anybody wants to use it, I will make sure that this is actually working. It was working until literally before we started. But if anyone is interested in adding metrics or exploring how it works, I will provide you the link. I don't think I have it. I will add it on to the slides. And feel free to contact me so that I can explain the process and how you can contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleni. And for the link, well, don't worry. Sometimes when you share the screen, crazy things happen. So this is not the first time. And maybe you can add the link also to the class outline in GitHub.
It's very intuitive. They can literally, you can copy the metric, change the couple of things that you need to change, and you can add a new metric. You don't need to do anything.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now, Anise, can you hear us? I hope.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, good to see you. So,
hi, Monica, everybody. Thanks again for this opportunity. I'm glad to be here again. I'm going to talk about particles and how we can search them on tools, digital tools. And I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see if it works now. Is it working?
Yes, it works. I can see your
okay.
slides.
If you can, when the slides appear, I can see them. So let me here.
Okay, excellent.
Okay. As usual, my presentation involves the use of digital resources developed by our friends from Leipzig and Tufts concerning the study of Greek language, and address them to students and mainly undergraduate ones in order to stimulate them to commit to our projects, always considering the conditions and the context that we have here at our institution to learn Greek. And this idea of talking about particles is that I would like to check them in terms of possible annotations, following ideas of traditional scholars as well those from modern linguistics. This is a topic that Hellenists are very aware of it. And I intend to address today first the motivation to choose the particles, and I'll talk a little bit about traditional concepts of the Greek particles, the relationship with the corpus linguistics and the modern concepts, the querying the ancient Greek dependence tree bank entendre, using Skype affordances and Verity to verify translations. In the end, I'd like to see the possibility and the interest of having particles annotated too, or if it's a false problem. In fact, I found a pretext to explore the digital resources by studying particle relations. So, why particles? One of the reasons for following this path is the perception of first-year students of Greek reactions towards them when doing their first alignment tasks. Also, the long, difficult history to classify and to categorize the particles, and the fact that particles may have an indirect impact on other studies involving lexical density, styles, genre, etc. What scares the first-year students of Greek? Inflection, maybe. But we already have Morpheus in many applications for automatic morphological analysis. Finding the appropriate meaning of words, yes, but at least now we have one digital dictionary, Greek Portuguese online, working. It's not perfect, but it's being improved. And it's not so difficult to find the correspondence between content words in Greek and Portuguese. What's next? The students say, why can't I align these words? Why can't I find the Portuguese word for this Greek word? That's their complaint about. So this is an example of, we have here the interlinear alignment performed with Alpheus on Perseids platform of Odyssey Book 6, line 21 to 23. The words in red, you see here, are not aligned. In the first circle, we have two particles, de and ara, both in elision, ara. The first one is not aligned correctly, since da, d plus a, da, in Portuguese is a preposition, not a particle. And they here can mean simply and. So Kai was correctly aligned, and we believe that coordination is not easy to find out. And the other particle, man, was not aligned. We have here other word classes not aligned too, such as a pronoun, an article, and a small inflected verb, which can be confused to here, here, and here. But I believe that the chances of particles disappearing in the translation seem to be greater than articles, pronouns, and or verbs. Even when we look at the aligned texts available on Alpheus, they notice that the same particle there sometimes has no match, and sometimes means but, sometimes and here we can see that this example. The same sentence we can have find in TreeBank, AGDT, how the particles are annotated. We have two pairs of coordinating particles here and here. Kai with the, and men with the. Tagged as chord and ox y, and one single ara marked ox y. The AGDT rule says that to label the last one with chord tag and the others with ox y. And this case here means that the particle is a sentence adverb, and we will see that further. For those who are not familiar with Greek particles, we have to say that they are a large group of words with different functions and a long discussion history of a particle categorization. Anise extracts grammatician from the 2nd century BC. For him, they are part of the group of conjunctions, syndesmoi, which are divided in copulative, disjunctive, conditional, explanatory, causal, dubitative, syllogistic, and or inferential, and the expletive meaning. So, for Denniston, they are adverbs, sentence adverbs or not, that have a large range of force with elusive meaning, rhetorical or emotional value. They are difficult to translate, maybe mean a pause or even alterations in pitch. They also can have the conjunctional function. Smith, in his Greek grammar for ecology, is written to 1920, used as a reference for AGD2, says that particles may be arranged in classes: adversative, affirmative, asseverative, concessive, confirmative, conjunctive, inferential, intensive, interrogative, limitative, negative, etc. And these classes cannot always be sharply distinguished. Since the 80s, there has been an influence from discursive pragmatics and corpus linguistics methodology. And some particles correspond to non-content words with high frequency when compared to lexical words. Many particles correspond to what is called grammatical or function items, or words in opposition to lexical or content words. That distinction is relevant in modern languages, considering the concept of lexical density, which is measured by the percentage of lexical items over the total words in a text. It can implicate a factor of readability. For Halliday, lexical density is recognized as a significant factor of the complexity or of written language. The spoken language would have a grammatical complexity with a higher frequency of fewer grammatical words and diversity of content words of lower frequency. Stubbs in 1996 had the expectations that written texts would have fewer repetitions of content words, and spoken language would be more predictable and supported by physical context, which is true. His finds with large corpus of the English language he said that the clearest difference is not between written and spoken, but within a spoken genre. Talking about Greek context in particular, Denniston in 1934, reprinted in 1954, and Giroux in 1997, have to say about what would be the role of particles in that distinction of written and spoken texts. Denniston believed that particles would have a higher frequency in scenic texts, and even more in comedy, reflecting dialogical, the position of dialogical and non-dialogical texts. Giroux found that, in fact, there was no significant difference when dialogical texts were compared to non-dialogical ones, but the stage texts, as those in Aristophanes' comedy and Sophocles' drama, had more particles than prose texts, such as Plato's dialogues. Also, he found that non-staged passages have more particles with coordinating function, suggesting staged ones have more asyndeton. As to discursive approaches, culture in 2009 suggests Chrome's categories for levels of discourse to understand the Greek particles based on Halliday's metafunctions of the systemic functional grammar. Representational refers to ideational metafunction. Other studies, such as that of Van Roy, 2016, and analyzing particles of Plato's Apology of Socrates, adopts a concept that comes from evidentiality, and Palmer, searching for general theory, proposed two systems: propositional with epistemic and event modality, epistemic, which deals with the degrees of certainty, speculative, deductive, and assumptive, and evidential, which deals with reported discourse and sensory types of evidence. Other types are also presupposed, negative, interrogative, wish, and fears. Other authors organize the types of modality differently. So there are theoretical paths to follow in order to classify particles. But for the purpose of this presentation, I chose one special particle, data, which would be simply an expletive particle for Dionysus tracks. For Denniston, we can find all those uses: interrogative, emphatic, connective, in combination, and uncertain cases. Van Roy, in his recent study, puts data in Plato's Apology of Socrates, classifying the usage he found as a case of evidentiality or inferential usage, although he adopts a more detailed system from Plungian, 2010. In the case of this particle, he turned to Denniston to explain the usage of as having an inferential value. So, since we use Smythe's grammar for colleges for three-bank semantic classification on IAGDT2, I brought here the main three meanings and usage of that particle. In answers, we have the main meanings: really, true, and then in answers, in questions, and in wishes and deprecations. So, what can AGDT show about the particle? Since, I tell to my students the famous first saying, "You shall know a word by the company it keeps." In Portuguese, we say, "Tell me who you go with, and I tell you who you are." The idea seems to come from as a fable. It happens that the digital resources find tools to check the company of word and its relation to other words, of course. And that's why I will give an example of how to use AGDT on Tundra and some other resources to examine these particles. So Tundra website, I don't go to the website because I'm not sure if my connection will resist to the change of windows here. So the Tundra means Dubbing Annotated Data Retrieval Analysis. Is a R&D project that provides, I quote, linguistic data, tools, and services in an integrated, interoperable, and scalable infrastructure for the social sciences and humanities. It's funded by German Federal Ministry for Education and Research. And AGDT, you I believe are familiar with this. The Ancient Greek Dependency Tree Bank is a Perseus, part of Perseus project, and has 33,000 sentences annotated. In this part, you will need the query syntax on Tundra. On Tundra help page, they have a help page to help with querying syntax, and the Celano's document on querying Tundra, searching for word data. So this is what we get when we are logged into Tundra. We have on the top, we have the query field on the left. Then the number of matches, which is 37, and URN on the source that correspond to the census. In order to locate the source, we have to look for it on Perseus catalog, the Sophocles Tarquinian line 73. The says, according to JEP translation, where then is he reported to be now, alive or dead? So, and on that blue banner, we have the tabs to see the dependence tree, the table view, the keywords in context, and statistics. So here is the slide of where we can find the work related to URN. And so on Tundra, if you want to know with what tags the word is annotated, we have to select statistics and look for edge in the options here. And add it to the search. As a result, we have two labels that were used to annotate this particle, OX-Z and OX-Y. However, that search is not counting on the possible elision of this particle, which has a vowel at its end. So if I want to include the lesion leaded forms, I can search for the lemma. And you see here the search using word in the syntax, and here the AGT guidelines explaining how to annotate, how to use OX-Z and OX-Y label. And I showed you the examples of conjunctions, relative conjunctions in the first slides. And then we will have sentence adverbs particles. So let's see what we have with lemma. With lemma, we still have oxy and y, but we don't have the cite option here. When searching for the lemma, the cite option doesn't appear, and I don't know why that happens here. This slide shows the keyword in context. But keywords in context are not new, and Perseus under Philological, for example, from the University of Chicago, already offers that option with the text sources using Perseus Digital Library Archives with the concordance report. It resulted in 306 occurrences of data here. Let's see what a Skype viewer can show us. 455 occurrences of data. Of course, the results depend on the size of the corpus. Skype has 20.1 million words in Greek. Let's see what TLG, the Thesaurus of Greek Language, has. This lemma appears 995 times. The highest use is found in Aristophanes, Euripides, and Plato. The chart shows the relative distribution with the number of this, showing that the number of this particle is overrepresented statistically, considering all the TLG corpus. This is the result from 6 BC to AD second, and they have 31 million words. And we can see here the number of expected and the number of over and or underrepresented usage of this particle. Unfortunately, TLG is a restricted service with limited tools, and we hope that should have more tools eventually, and the corpus enlarged. So let's go back to Tundra. What can Tundra still give me? I already know that the particle was annotated as either ox, z, or y. Now I can see that the head of the particle. I also can see the head of the particle in the particular tree. That query will give me any word to which the lemma annotated as ox, y is attached to. They are all verbs. 25 over 92. The same query we have here with the word data, and we have what? We have a majority of pronouns. So the head of the data particle is a pronoun in majority here. Of course, we have the dependence of the number of the corpus, the annotated corpus, to obtain the result. Let's take a closer look at the sentence with data as ox z. In this sentence, we don't have a question, but expressing a negative request with the negative adverb me and the verb in aorist subjunctive. Me data prosteon ton geron tameai kise. No, in the name of the gods, do not mistreat an old man. We have here the translation to in Portuguese, invoca os numes, poupa homem velho. The French translation, je t'en conjure par le Dieu, ne frappe point un veillard. In Spanish, por los dioses no há un anciano como yo. So we see that translator, the translator here, yes, what in Portuguese and French, the translator uses a declarative verb to invoke and to conjure using directed discourse. The Spanish translations has a vocative, a directed discourse, por los dioses. In English, in the name of gods, which is a direct translation for the Greek, right? So, there's another, this other sentence. The particle data is tagged with ox-z again. The sentence is a question. There is another particle ara oesta, here, which creates the expectation for a question and an answer. The translator uses the word then to mark the epistemic value. In the Spanish and French translation, we have just aucune raison and con raison, which translates the adverbial expression pros diques. And the negative may come from the initial particle ara. And do you know then that your fears are wholly in vain? So, and we can see the connection between the words. Here we have another question. The particle is used together with the interrogative pronoun ti. Again, the translator in English uses then to give the epistemic value that introduces the inferred intent of the interlocutor. What do you want then? To banish me from the land? What in Portuguese, qual é tua meta? Me banir de Tebas. What's your goal? To banish me from Tebas. And you can see this. Que veux-tu donc me chasser de la ville? So, the next one, we have another example of usage that comes from Plato's passage, where the particle is used abundantly as a short and negative answer along with another negative adverb. In the tree bank, the particle depends on the negative part. The epistemic value behind is the certainty with asseveration. Now, an example of data as XY is a question where the translator in Portuguese uses the word de certo, which means for sure. The Spanish translation has pues, which means well or then, and French translation added je pense, I suppose. It's a request for confirmation for something presupposed. There is an inferential value. Now, we have the sentence expressing a desire, which is a volitive exclamative sentence and is marked by optative mode of the verb to see, idoito, along with the particle data. In the English translation, the particle is translated by indeed. In Spanish, we don't have the particle translated, only an exclamative punctuation. In Portuguese and French, the word yes was added. The request is volitive and may mean fear. So now I show you the search for this particle using Ugarit, a tool for multi-language translation alignment. Searching for the same particle, we get the translation available in Scorps data here in the field, and there's this result. As we have here the results on Ugarit, and we can see in English the variety of translation for this particle. But the majority up to now is 12, 10, then, sorry, 5 indeed, 5 pray, 3 oh, 2 really, there is a negative really shouldn't. Just to illustrate how all of these tools can help us in complex subjects, and the tree bank annotation has a vast path to follow. Yeah. So this particle adventure can lead us to suggest to keep the current syntax annotation and to add more information related to metafunctions, such as interactional and others, representational, presentational, or related to modalities such epistemic or volitive. As to the data particle, we could classify as interactional, as a category, major category, and divide this class into speech categories: question, answer, exclamation, direct speech, and direct speech. The answer can be positive or negative. Is it always asseverative? The question is expected to have an epistemic value. Which one? And the exclamative sentences are always volitive, expressing emotional content or fear, or maybe anger, or even joy. So to end this presentation, I will make these questions, which could be formed with data particle. So first one is you to me. Do you really want to explore particles? The second would be Giuseppe to me. In the name of God, don't bring me particles to the tree bank. And the third one to myself, what do you want to do then? Become more stressed than you are? So that is my, I would like to have your feedback on particles. If you believe that is it's not a false problem, and if it's really worth looking for it and annotate the particles. So I leave my slides, and I will.
Okay, Anise, thank you very much. And I enjoyed the 3 last questions because, yes, definitely I know the problem. In fact, when I read, okay, she's going to talk about particles, a lot of fun. Well, yes, this is a big problem. And I also know Giuseppe's reaction to the banking. Yes. Okay, so questions. We have people in the Hangout. So thank you both. It was great. Very intense session, I have to say, with detailed and specific problems. So if people have questions, please. Okay, a long silence after particles, I think. Well, a general question for you, Anise, also because, well, yes, particles are, well, I think we have to address them, definitely, also in a digital environment. But a general question, so you have shown these tools, and you started with, you started talking about the students and the difficulties that students have, of course, in learning Greek, etc., and in dealing with particles. And given that the aim of Sunoikis' digital classics is to involve students and to look for new tools for teaching Greek and Latin, so a general question, so how has been changing teaching Greek and Latin with these new tools, with the tree banking, the alignment, and then you have now a great resource with the Greek-Portuguese dictionary. So how is your experience in a class, especially in the last years with these new tools? So I know that now for students it's important to visualize in general things, and for example, visualizing the syntax is important for them to learn the morphology and the syntax. What do you think about that? What is your experience? And then we can also ask, of course, this is a question also for Eleni.
Well, I don't have many students. Our classes have, my classes, in fact, because first year students, the class of first year students have more students, around 18. It's maximum 20, but maybe 15.
It's a good number.
First year students. Then second year, we have maybe 6, 7 or 8 students. And then at the end, we have 3 or 4. But what is happening is that if I begin earlier dealing with digital tools in the class, let's see, in the first or second year, they become more interested, and the tree bank is fantastic for them. They have difficulty because they don't know syntax in Portuguese, right? So it's not only a Greek problem, but those who have more experience in syntax discover how to the mechanism of the language, how to do it, and be more in have this instrument to be able to read. This is a point, a very important issue, to learn the syntax and understand how the language works. Then with 30 students, I tried to give them translations to align with Greek without knowing almost nothing of Greek, and they are able to align the main content to words, and of course the small words, and they find very fast that the translations they find, they compare the translations, they don't correspond exactly to the Greek. But beside, even with all these difficulties, we have more students willing to participate in the project. So we have now 4 or 5 undergraduate students with projects related to the dictionary or the alignment, translation alignments, raising questions about doing this tasks. So comparing to the size of the classes, to have 5 or 6, no, more, 6 undergraduate students with projects is it's amazing. It's a crowd, you know. So it happens after I became familiar with those tools and projects with Sunoikis, etc. And the help of my Leipzig and Tufts friends, because we count only on the work of a volunteer with expertise in computer programming. So we don't have time to develop ourselves other resources or implement, maybe adding a corpus, annotated corpus, but not the application itself.
Yes, and about this last thing, definitely. So the idea is not to produce too many different tools for annotations, and in the end they overlap them. So the idea is, and this is what we have been trying to do, not only in Leipzig, of course, at Tufts also, but also in other places, to have the tools with the help of people expert in, of course, programming. What we need is data. And I know that your community in Araraquara is a strong community, because you, for ancient Greek, you have many students and you're working very hard. And for you, Eleni, so again, so you showed us your work. I know that you have a community also in Florida, many students. So what is your impression? So using these tools in the class for learning, in this case, Greek.
I have it's a different background and different tools lately, different student groups lately for me. I am not teaching beginners Greek and Latin for the past few years. So I cannot talk about how students, I don't have a direct engagement with them. However, I have, over the past 2 years, I have started working as the teaching assistant coordinator for the department, and our teaching assistants are the ones who are teaching the beginners Latin and beginners Greek. So what I did is I have started training them to learn how to use to annotate and teach Latin and Greek, the beginners classics, using these tools. And first of all, they were very interested themselves to learn how to use them. They found the explanation of syntax less disappointing and less frustrating because they have, they're students themselves and they're trying to teach Greek and Latin syntax to students, like Anise said, who do not necessarily know grammar and syntax in English, in our case. So it's always a challenge, and it has been a lot more pleasant. And I can't say that we have a huge increase in numbers, but to be honest, compared to other classics departments, we are doing very well. And we have students who take Latin 1, 2, and 3 for the language requirement, but however, after their initial year and a half, they decide to stick it out and continue with intermediate and advanced Latin and Greek as well. So it has been very positive, not only for the undergraduate students, but from what our TAs tell me, it has been a very pleasant experience for them as well. And I'm also using this, I have a PhD student, and she's working with a reception of Greek tragedy, and she has started with Medea, working on Medea. And she wants to analyze, and we will see this will be an experiment. She's working with Euripides, with Seneca, and she wants to run some experiments into the movie Gone Girl, and compare the script and find, she has already found patterns and parts of the speech where she's, when she's going through phases similar to Medea, she wants to run syntactical analysis and linguistic analysis to see if she can draw any, I don't know, any connecting points between these two. It's a long shot, but it's very interesting. So I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you very much for this. And yes, of course, I remember. So you don't teach Greek and Latin in this sense specifically, but in any case, and also in Leipzig, we have a similar experience in the sense that we don't have only classicists in our classes, but we have a mixed audience. But in any case, we use these tools also for other languages, and we see that they work a lot. So our time, unfortunately, is over, and I don't see questions. I think that people are a bit shocked by particles. No, well, of course, this is a difficult topic, but in any case, thank you for talking about them in Sunoikisis. I think people need some time to think about it, and this is important also in general for the community, because we have now your presentation and we have the class outline exercise. So I hope there will be feedback. And for you, Anise, of course, this is an open question. So also for three bankers, we hope we will be able to integrate in a better way also particles. Well, now, unfortunately, our time is over, so I have to stop broadcasting. Thank you, Eleni and Anise.
Thank you.
It was great, as usual. And so next week, we don't have Sunoikisis because it's holiday in Leipzig, and so we can't have it because I have students here, so I can't have a session. But we will be back in 2 weeks on May 17, and we have a session about geoannotation. So thank you again. Good night for, well, it's still afternoon anyway. Good night for people in my time zone. And for Anise and for Eleni, I think enjoy your lunch. Yes, something like that. I think it's lunchtime, I think. Okay. So thank you very much. The class outline is on GitHub. I think that you are going to add your slides because they are very, very important. And okay, so I think that's it. Good night and thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good night.
And